Thanks for joining us. I'm Jennifer Sanders. In the next half hour, we'll bring you a range of stories honoring Black history in Central Texas and beyond. We'll show you how volunteers are stepping up to preserve a piece of history, honoring the loved ones of families in one small community. Plus, the legacy of a legal pioneer, how this Austin judge helped make history while paving the way for others. And you'll meet some young women with Olympic dreams. They're setting new standards in gymnastics and opening doors for other athletes. But first, we head just west of downtown Austin to an area filled with historic charm. Clarksville is a highly sought after neighborhood with many homes costing well over $1.5 million. But the story of Clarksville dates all the way back to the 1800s, thanks to one Black man who wanted to make sure freed slaves had their own community. I sat down with Charles Clark's descendants as they worked to amplify the stories and the voices of their ancestors. For some, it might be hard to imagine the origins of Clarksville, its legacy, and the critical role it's played in our state's history. But for Felicia Miller,
I'm grateful for Clarksville.
It's her history. The streets telling her family's story in Texas, which dates all the way back to 1871.
It makes me feel proud and appreciative because I'm a part of something that's major.
Miller is a descendant of former slave Charles Clark, the founder of Clarksville. It's one of Texas's earliest freedmen communities, west of the Mississippi River, established after the Civil War.
Can't even imagine how, when they first started it, what the thoughts were, what the plan of action was.
Clark created the community as an oasis of freedom and peace for those freed from slavery, a place where they could reunite with family and friends. Many of them lived in similar wood frame homes like the Haskell House on Waterston Avenue, which has been designated a historic landmark. It's named after Hezekiah Haskell, who served in the Union Army in the Civil and Indian Wars. He's also part of Miller's family tree, her family exchanging fond memories of him throughout the years.
At one point, there used to be a fig tree on the property, and my uncle would always say that Uncle Kai would always get after him because he would be climbing his tree, picking his figs.
Going inside of the house, you get a closer look into his life, his family and friends' photos hanging from the walls. The land this home sits on was purchased for $100, built between 1875 and 79. The original floor plan is unaltered. It represents the fabric that weaves together Linnell Jarman's history, another descendant of Hezekiah Haskell.
This is him and his wife and their 4 kids. They show 3, and just out of the picture frame on the right side is his son. It's like all of the stories that I've been told and all of the history that I've read is now alive.
So when you walk in the house, what do you feel?
It gives me strength in my weak moments to remember that I come from a family who is not afraid to stand their ground, to be resilient.
That same resilience laid the foundation for Sweet Home Missionary Baptist Church, the cornerstone of Clarksville. According to oral history provided by Mary Reed with Clarksville CDC, organizers of Sweet Home paid money for the land that they later built their church on.
That's where everyone went to church. That's where social life revolved around the church. It was kind of like the community center, the heart of the neighborhood.
Stories from the church and early Clarksville have been Reed's focus for years. She's brought together descendants like Jarman and Miller to form an advisory group that meet here at the Haskell House. Although the area has changed dramatically over the years and the population looks quite different, the group is working diligently to elevate the history of early Clarksville across Central Texas.
This is a part of my history. My first cousins and I always used to hope and joke that we could someday have houses here right next to each other.
It's different, but it's still Clarksville. You still, at least for me, I still get that home feeling. I still get that peace feeling. I appreciate every brick that they laid, every tear that they cried. You don't understand a lot of things when you're young, but when you get older, as the elders say, you understand it better by and by.
The advisory group that Miller and Jarman are a part of are focused on getting visitors to the Hezekiah Haskell House, which is in the Clarksville National Register Historic District, a 10-block area west of West Lynn Street, and is the oldest documented residence in the district. A new exhibit in the Briscoe Center at UT Austin is shedding light on the ways enslaved people found freedom and how one family in Central Texas played a very key role.
So this exhibit consists mostly of court documents. These documents give us a picture of the legal world that they inhabited and sometimes navigated, the long process that could take in order to obtain freedom legally. This provides us with real primary source evidence of the experience that people went through trying to gain their freedom and trying to exist in a world where they were born without human rights.
Sylvia Hector Weber, whose East Austin land is now Weberville, is at the center of the exhibit's message. She came to Texas with her enslaver. She later met John Weber. He would buy a large parcel of land and fall in love with Sylvia. In 1834, he would buy her freedom.
The cost to free Anne Maria was $1,000 at the time, which is about $31,000 today. The couple were given several months to quote-unquote pay using the lives of 2 children in exchange for Sylvia and her children's freedom. And the document that we have on display explains that. We know from other research that this was not paid. The Webers ended up losing their land.
The Weber family then moved to South Texas, where they became an outpost for the Southern Underground Railroad. That was a path to help slaves escape to freedom in Mexico. We're just getting started with our Honoring Black History special. We'll look closer at the lasting legacy of a legal pioneer right here in Central Texas. But first, athletes shaping the future of their sport. We'll take you to the Texas gym that's home to some of our country's top Olympic hopefuls, how they're changing their sport and opening doors for others. Welcome back to our special presentation, Honoring Black History. We're just months away from the Olympic Games, and behind every athlete is a personal journey that led them to where they are today. Our Jayla Washington joins us now, shining a light on how a group of gymnasts are changing the game and the face of elite gymnastics. Jayla?
Literally changing the game and the face. The girls at the World Champion Center just outside of Houston. This is Simone Biles' gym, by the way, are a part of something so much bigger than just themselves in a sport that has been historically predominantly white. Now more than ever, young women of color are top athletes who have a real shot at qualifying for this summer's Olympic Games.
Just outside of Houston is a gym, unassuming on the outside. But inside, dozens of elite gymnasts train here. They've gone on to win Olympic medals. Powerhouse athletes like Simone Biles.
3, 4, and 5, 6, and 7, and 8.
Balance. Good. Power, strength, and grace.
Gymnastics kind of saved my life.
I've always loved the thrill of flipping.
They kind of realized that I could do a lot more than the other kids, like I wasn't just playing around.
The athletes here are at the top of their game.
Thank you for sitting down with me. I appreciate y'all.
Tiana Suminasekra, Zoe Miller, Jordan Childs are challenging what's considered more conservative sport by breaking down barriers and inspiring others along the way.
As I got older and I started to realize like it's not common that a colored girl would be represented in that way in our sport.
And her specialty is a controlled landing.
Jordan Childs took home a team silver in the 2020 Tokyo Games. And since then, she continues to pave the way for women in her sport, alongside her teammate Simone Biles. Another Olympic gold medalist of color.
How do you do it? You wear so many hats.
Lori Hernandez can't help but admire the athletes coming up behind her.
I think what's really interesting about WCC is how well-rounded their athletes are.
She's now turned her attention to inspiring others as a UNICEF ambassador, but gymnastics and these young Olympic hopefuls remain close to her heart.
Representation matters. There's a surge of athletes of color and gymnasts of color who are coming in and seeing this representation on TV. A lot of it really did begin with Gabby Douglas.
Least attack.
She can fly.
Gabby Douglas, the first Black Olympian to win all-around in women's gymnastics, is someone these three gymnasts who have their sights set on medaling in Paris are coming after.
2 flip-flops to a full twisting double somersault.
Plus, Dominique Dawes, the first black athlete to win an individual medal.
She did go through a lot within her time frame, and seeing where gymnastics has progressed.
She ran so we could sprint.
Literally, we're trying to inspire not only the world, but like our cultures.
The 2023-2024 Women's Senior National Gymnastics Team is one of the most diverse in the past decade.
Even at World, having an all-black podium.
And Tiana is the first American gymnast competing with Sri Lankan heritage.
I love my heritage, I love representing it, and just having such diversity in the sport now.
For somebody who's like, well, why does it matter? Why do you need to see people who look like you competing?
Seeing people that you look alike is like, wow, I can really be doing that as well.
A lot of stigmas are placed on sports. It's like, oh, white kids do that, or that's sports for black people. I feel like bringing diversity into gymnastics and a lot of other sports helps people expand their horizons.
As young girls, they dreamed big and worked hard.
This is a routine I saw on the computer.
All three alongside their teammate Simone Biles, trying to qualify for the 2024 Paris Olympics.
It's Simone, it's Jordan, it's Zoe, it's Tiana. Like, you guys are incredible. Do you guys recognize the magnitude of that?
I think for us, it's like when we walk outside and we go to a competition and we're like, guys, like we literally make our own group. Like, this is crazy, but
that's when we realized.
That's when we realized.
Such a beautiful story. And this is a story that you were able to tell so thoroughly because you have a personal connection.
Yeah, it was truly a full circle moment for me being back in a gym. I was an athlete, a gymnast my entire life, literally age 3 to 23. I even competed at the Division I collegiate level. And personally growing up, I can tell you there were not a lot of people in the sport who looked like me. So kind of seeing this shift in the last 10 years or so has been really amazing. And you heard the girls from WCC touch on how much representation matters. It's a confidence booster. It makes you feel a little less alone, and I think it really just adds to what you can accomplish in the sport and beyond.
And there's also been a shift when we talk about mental health and gymnasts, and someone who's really been leading that charge is Simone Biles.
Yeah. Well, we got to take it back to the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. That is where Simone, she got a case of the twisties. Basically, it is tied to a mental block when it physically ends up affecting your body. But she handled it with such grace and poise, and she was not afraid to say, hey, you know what? I need to take myself out of the competition. This is really powerful, not just for sports, but athletes in particular in the gymnastics world, because it really is unlike any other sport. And gymnasts, we're just going to all of these lengths to perform at the top of our game, and you are using your body. Now, Simone, she will always be the GOAT. That is some video that we got when we were in Houston. I got to chat with her off camera, and her teammates, they just really look up to her. Simone is so down to earth, and I think having an athlete like her who is so talented but down to earth really just proves that, you can take your sport seriously but still have a life outside of the sport. And I think that all contributes to just mental health and prioritizing you.
Okay, it's so important. Well, we will be tracking their stories as well as seeing your coverage this summer at the Olympic Games in Paris. Thanks so much, Jayla. She was a judge, a civil rights activist, and a game changer for diversity at the University of Texas Law School. Coming up next, the life and lasting legacy of a legal pioneer. And later in the show, stepping up to restore a piece of history, how volunteers are helping families keep memories of their loved ones alive. Welcome back to our special presentation honoring Black history. This year, the first Black woman appointed to a permanent role as a judge in Texas died at the age of 96. In her lifetime, Harriet Mitchell Murphy was a judge, a civil rights activist, and a game changer for diversity at the University of Texas Law School. Investigative reporter Kelly Wiley shows how even in death, her impact still ripples across the country.
Judge Harriet Mitchell Murphy's portrait hangs among the images of dozens of other decorated UT Law School graduates. But in 1966, when the 37-year-old widow enrolled at UT, she stood alone as the only Black student in her class. Her path to UT Law paved by Black students before her, starting with Heman Sweat in 1950. He won entry to what was then the all-white law school at UT in a landmark Supreme Court case. Although he opened the door to integration, Sweat grew too sick to graduate himself. And in the years between Sweat's departure in 1952 and Murphy's enrollment in 1966, only a handful of Black students graduated. At one point, Murphy was not just the only Black student in her class, but the only Black student in the entire law school. At the time, her longtime friend and mentee, Arlise Upton Keyes, said Murphy told her she felt she had little to no support.
She told us that there were some who actually said to her, "You will never graduate from law school, and you will never pass the bar."
At the moment when many would feel discouraged, Murphy pushed through and pulled in other Black students with similar dreams. In her memoir, Judge Murphy recounts how she and her white classmate started to recruit Black students to UT Law from HBCUs like Prairie View University and Jarvis Christian College, saying, "We netted 12 or 13 student recruits for the fall of 1968.
No, I think that she felt that she had to do something, that she was positioned to do something. She always saw an opportunity to make a difference, an opportunity to make a change.
And in 1969, with more Black faces in the hallways, she graduated UT Law and passed the bar. She went on to make history as the first Black woman in Texas appointed a permanent judgeship in 1973. She served for nearly 2 decades on Austin's municipal court.
Harriet just never met an obstacle or a problem that could not be resolved. And she did that in a very, very positive way.
Judge Murphy's mind and heart was always with UT, even in her last conversation with a dear friend.
You know, that last meeting was so very special. I had come to her home from a scholarship award luncheon. And consistent with her being a teacher and sharing information and her experiences, she wanted to know, who were the students? It reminded me of the questions that she had asked when she met with me and the other pre-law students almost 50 years ago. And I think one of her biggest concerns was that she not be the last, and that door be permanently opened for other people like her.
Judge Murphy made sure of that. Arlise, who you saw in the story, she was mentored by Judge Murphy as a young student. She went on to graduate law school. She's now the president of the law school's Alumni Association and a trustee of the Law School Foundation. And Judge Murphy, she also championed what is now the Virgil C. Lott Medal. It's named after the very first Black student to graduate UT Law School.
Okay, so what a life. And you read her memoir.
Yes.
What did you learn about her life?
I would recommend anyone read this book, especially if you're looking for inspiration. She's lived an incredible journey, starting in Atlanta, Georgia. She went to high school with none other than Martin Luther King Jr. Who can say that? But she said even then he was showing such promise. He had a message. He knew what he wanted to say. She remembered that about him. In law school, she talks about meeting Thurgood Marshall, who was critical in that Sweat versus Painter case, telling him about her experience being one of the only Black students at the law school. But even after her time in school, she was continuing to make an impact, continuing to make an impression on incredible people. She's met everyone from Willie Nelson to presidents, President Jimmy Carter, President Bill Clinton. I mean, a remarkable life, a remarkable woman. Anybody, run to the library. That's where I got my copy and read her book.
Okay, like you said, a remarkable woman with a lasting legacy. Kelly, thank you so much. Well, coming up right now, a Central Texas cemetery overgrown and forgotten. People with family members laid to rest there feel they've been forgotten too. But see how change that's happening now is restoring some hope. Welcome back to our special presentation honoring Black history. For our final story, we're taking you southeast of Austin to Fayette County. Mount Olive Cemetery is a final resting place for hundreds of African Americans, including veterans as far back as the First World War. But over the years, the cemetery was essentially forgotten, and with little upkeep, it fell into disrepair. But now a months-long cleanup is giving renewed hope, especially to families who have relatives there. Our very own Jayla Washington tells their story.
On the bed of his truck, Ernest Anderson lays down precious family photos.
And here's my mom and father.
They look just like both of them.
He reminisces with one of his oldest friends, Mr. Horace Drysdale.
He worked on the railroad. He was a cowboy.
It's an emotional moment for both of them,
Yeah.
standing outside of Mount Olive Cemetery.
And this is my mother's daddy, buried here. And this is my father's dad.
They're just feet away from where their loved ones, some in these pictures, are buried.
I grew up here. I know most of these people.
Drysdale has lived here his entire life. He says about 85% of his own relatives are buried here. And Anderson has close to a dozen, some of his family members even veterans. And as much as they've tried to keep the grounds up themselves, it just wasn't feasible over the years.
Deteriorated because the population of blacks moved away from this area. There was no one to keep this place clean.
Before now, you couldn't come in this way.
Drysdale tells me this entrance to the cemetery with this gate and cattle guards to protect the graves was put up in part by him years ago. But it wasn't until last October some veterans from the VFW Post 2527 came out and started cutting down trees and brush, creating an actual walkway for families to visit grave sites.
You can tell this is brand new.
More than halfway done with the cleanup now, the VFW's Post is taking full inventory at the cemetery, according to one of its members, Steve Simmons.
The families, their older generation, they'll be able to go out there and actually see, where people rest.
And hopefully they are happier now that the cemetery is getting redone.
Jayla Washington, KXAN News.
A number of organizations, including the Sacred Heart Catholic Church in Rockney, Texas, have helped with that cleanup. The VFW Post 2527 is also working to get the cemetery recognized with the Texas Historical Marker. The rich history of African Americans across Central Texas has really left its mark on our nation's history. We're so grateful for these pioneers, their fight, and their sacrifices to make our state, our country, and our world a better place. Thank you so much for joining us for this special presentation honoring Black history.